luncheon and have not yet registered, you might consider doing so now, quite soon. That's coming up April 28th and 29th, and you can see me for details afterwards. And then our membership team this week sent out a survey via SurveyMonkey, and we would appreciate your spending, it takes about 2 minutes, I think it took me about 30 seconds to complete, so that we can find out what interests, what issues you are interested in. Our membership team is interested in that because they can assist placing you in certain areas, and then our program team is also interested in that information for next year. And I would just like to take a moment to personally thank a most hard-working team, our Affordable Housing Committee. This group was co-chaired by Rebecca Borman, Mindy Greiling, Bonnie Cook, and members included Judy Berglund, Emma Duran, Georgianne Hall, Claire Jordan, Kathy Juneman, Chris Nagy, Beth Salzo, and Karen Schaefer, Huda Youssef. But thank you so much to all of you. This group particularly and truly puts into practice the words of the mission statement for League of Women Voters, which is a nonpartisan political organization that studies and studies and studies, educates and advocates for issues concerning our democracy at the local, state, and national levels. The League does not endorse political parties or candidates. And we thank you so much for coming this evening and participating. And Bonnie Cook will now lead the presentation of this affordable housing study from this year.
Thank you. As Rita said, I am one of 3 chairs of this group. And Mindy Greiling cannot be with us tonight, but Rebecca Borman is here. There she is. She's one of the chairs. And the program for tonight is to go through all of the incredible amount of information that we've gathered in the last year. I'm going to present it in a PowerPoint, and then Emma Duran, who is over here, is going to field questions that you may have. We also have with us Karen Schaefer, who is got her handy little notebook here, because we are absolutely positive this is such a wide topic that there may be questions that come up that we aren't going to have the answers to right at our fingertips. So Karen will write those down, and then we will go back and double check that we have the right information for you and get back to you with all of those things. Oh goody. Oh, there we go. Okay. Here's as Rita's already introduced the people that were on our committee. We have, if you are a League member, you probably already know this, we have dedicated this study to Ann Berry, who recently passed away. Many decades member of the League and past president, and housing, affordable housing, was absolutely her passion. So without a doubt, we had to donate, or we had to dedicate this to her. Now, when we started out a year ago, we had a very, very narrow focus. And all we wanted to do at that time was to learn in our 5 cities what kinds of affordable housing was available and where it was located. We were curious as to, are these units spread throughout the cities, or are they concentrated in certain areas? And we soon learned that that was such a small piece of the pie that we had to expand our study goal. So we went on to expand it to the point of looking at the populations that we have now in our cities. The demographics of all of our cities has changed dramatically. It is not the same as it was 10 years ago. It is incredibly different than it was 20 years ago. So given the population that we have now, are we actually providing fair housing and an adequate amount of housing for all of the people in our populations? And then, because of our location, we're first ring suburbs, are we actually meeting the goals of the entire region, which is mainly under the auspices of the Metropolitan Council? Now, to begin with, and if you're a League member, you're probably aware of this, especially if you've read the summary, the written summary. Every one of our cities has what they call a comprehensive plan. It is like a framework, it's like a vision, it's like a dream of exactly what we would like to create as an ideal city. And these comprehensive plans have been in existence for a long time. They cover the economy, water resources, land use, transportation, parks and rec trails, and of course housing. And regularly the cities go in and they update their comprehensive plans. And right now, that's what all of our cities are doing. They are projecting out to the year 2030, and they are revising their view, their goals, what they would like to accomplish in their vision for the community as they reach 2030. Roseville is actually looking ahead to 2040. They are also working with the Metropolitan Council because the Metropolitan Council has certain guidelines, and each city's goals should fit within those guidelines. So they're spending the whole 2017 revising, updating, getting input from people who live in those communities, and then in the year 2018, they will submit their final plan to the Metropolitan Council. So what have we done about all of this? Well, we started by our very first meeting was with Dr. Craig Waldron, who's with us tonight. Craig is part of the Hamlin faculty. He's also past mayor of Oakdale, I believe it was. And he sat down. Okay. He sat down with us and he said, the first thing you've got to realize is this is such a broad topic, you've got to narrow your focus so that you can concentrate on exactly a certain aspect of it. You can't cover it all and cover it well. So with that being, we proceeded to have many, many, many meetings with people with housing expertise throughout the area. Some of the people Craig recommended to us, some of them we just kind of built on as we continue to meet. All of this, the summary of every time we have an interview with these people is on our website if you're interested in reading it. And then when going back, one of the people we met with was Dr. Ed Getz, who is at CURA, the Center for Urban and Regional Affairs. And it was his recommendation that we possibly work with the Capstone Project, which is over at CURA. And some of you are connected to the university, so you already know what that is, but if you aren't, it's Capstone's project is with graduate students, and what they do is it's the final thing in their program, and they take all of the tools that they have learned throughout their coursework, and they use all those tools, they put it together on a special project. And we were able to get 3 of them to agree to work with us. And what our goals for them are that we wanted them to use census data to analyze our unique cities, to develop 10-year frameworks that we can work with the city on as they update their comprehensive plans, and to provide us with some mapping of existing affordable housing, what's there right now. Now they're not, I'm sorry for my scratchy voice, they are not done with their project. They will be in another few weeks, and what they will do at that point is they will make a presentation to us, their clients, and we really encourage as many as possible of you to come to that meeting. It will be on Tuesday, May 9th at 3:30 p.m. and it will be in the Roseville Library Community Room. Now we have met with them a couple of times. In the last meeting, I wanted to bring in, you may want to look at this later. It's actually, this is just some of it. I mean, there's much information, but this is just some of the graphics they gave to us on what is existing rental housing in each of our cities now and where it's located. So you might want to find your city. It's broken up into both single-family homes and multifamily homes. So there's all the base. What exactly is affordable housing? Well, affordable housing is based on a formula out of the federal government, out of HUD, Housing and Urban Development. And it is based on area median income, meaning when you look at the greater metropolitan area, it is that median line. Half of the households have income above the line, half of the households have income below the line. So that line right in the middle is the line that they use to determine what's low income. The Metropolitan Council looks at the whole region, and it's their determination that in 2016, $85,800 was the median income for a family of 4. So using the formula from HUD, they would have then determined that anyone who has an AMI, average median income, from 0 to 30% would be classified as extremely low income. Anyone from 31 to 50% AMI is classified as very low income. And anyone from 51 to 80% AMI would be classified as low income. Now, these numbers of income actually vary. I mean, they're not hard and fast numbers because it varies by, are you a single parent and have 1 child? Are you in a household that has 5 members? Are you in a household that has 8 members? So it's like a sliding scale on actually where you fit in on each one of these. So it does vary by household size. So what does that mean for somebody who's in one of those categories going out and trying to find housing? Now, HUD says that every household can be expected to spend 30% of their income on housing, and that includes utilities. The minute you go above 30%, that means that that household has less money for health care, transportation, food, clothing, all of the other necessities of life. So if a family actually could buy a home, could actually purchase a single-family home, HUD has declared that if they were in that extremely low AMI, they could afford a home of $82,500. Now, we all know clearly that there are many of those around. If you were in the very low income, you could afford a home up to $148,000. And if you were in the low income, a home up to $235,000. So that being said, let me get out my pointer too. Obviously, finding housing in the greater metropolitan area is not going to be easy. Now, many, many people who are low income actually are renters. So what they do on that is they also have a scale, and it's what you can afford to pay for rent. And the formula figures that for every bedroom in the rental, you can house 1.5 people. So I can't really see it, but I went across the 1-bedroom line there. If you are extremely low, say you was a single parent and 1 child, you should be able to pay rent up to $483 a month. If you're very low, up to $805 a month. And if you are low, up to a little under $1,300 a month. So where does that put you on the spectrum? Now, what this shows is the average rent in the Twin Cities changing from 2009 to 2015. Now, clearly, if you are in extremely low or very low, you're not even in this average rent range. You're a little bit better off if you're just in the low income. But it's going to be pretty hard to find housing if you're in any of those categories. Which means, now this is coming from the Minnesota Housing Partnership, you run into a situation that this woman ran into. And her name was Vicki Olson. She lived in St. Louis Park. She's 51 years old. She had lived in her apartment for 13 years. She didn't have a lot of training, so she had a job that paid $10.50 an hour. Her apartment building was sold. And when the new buyers came in, what did they do? First thing was they raised rent. on a $10.50 an hour job. There was no way that Vicki Olson could afford to live there. So she started to put out her feelers in the whole general western metropolitan area. She finally found a place in Mound, which was 30 miles from her job. So this starts a whole spiral. Now she can't pay for an apartment. The only apartment she can find is in Mound. She can't go back and forth to her job. So she's now going to have to find another job too. So if you're in those areas, finding housing is very challenging. So what about the affordable housing in our cities here? On this, I'm going to have you look actually at, if I can get my, look up, the very far bar. I guess this, I'm not going very far over there. Oh, there we go. This one, way over on the side. Because this really shows changing data for about 25 years, and I just want you to look at that far one. And what this is doing is comparing median household income for Roseville and Maplewood. The blue is Roseville, the green is Ramsey County, the orange is the metro area, and kind of sage green is Maplewood. And what you can see there is that Roseville, the average median income is more than Ramsey County, but it is not as much as the greater metropolitan council area. The same is true for Maplewood, higher than Ramsey County, but not as high as the general area. This one's comparing Falcon Heights and Lauderdale. And again, look at those bars on the side on the far right. Falcon Heights actually has a higher average median income than both Ramsey County and actually the area in general. Lauderdale is significantly lower, and in fact, if you go one set of bar graph, you can see that actually Lauderdale's average median income has fell over a 5-year period. I used Lauderdale again, and I combined it with Little Canada. So again, the blue is Little Canada, the green is Ramsey County, the orange is the general metropolitan area, and the sage green is Lauderdale. And you can see both of those communities are below both Ramsey County and the greater metropolitan area. There's another group of people, and they're called cost-burden families. And those are people who are paying more than 30%. Maybe that's the only thing that they could find to rent. Maybe they got into a home and it's got on top of them payment-wise. But these families are paying more than 30%. They obviously then do not have as much, they're limited on what they can put out for food, health care, transportation, etc. Now again, if you look, this is for Falcon Heights, and if you look at the bar graphs on the far right, the blue is the overall population of Falcon Heights, and that says 33%, approximately a third of the people living in Falcon Heights are cost burdened. They're paying more than 30% to their housing. The green is the homeowners, single family homeowners. They're 22% are cost burdened. The purple are rental, multifamily apartment dwellers, and they're all just under 50% paying that are cost burdened. This is Lauderdale. Again, the bars on the far right. The blue is the overall 34% of the people in Lauderdale are cost burdened. Only 16% of the homeowners, but 49% of apartments, or renters, I should say renters, because they could be renting homes as well. This is Little Canada, 33% overall, 25% of household or of owner household, 46% are cost burden renters. Maplewood, 31 overall, 22% of homeowners, 55% of people renting in Maplewood are cost burdened. And this is Roseville. This information is all coming from the Metropolitan Council. 26% of the people living in Roseville are cost burdened, 28%, excuse me. 20% are of the owner households, and 44% of people renting are cost burdened. So, where does the housing stand right today? Now, in last fall, we sent out surveys to all of our cities asking for this information. We found that it was really probably too early to ask. They were just at the very, very beginning of trying to gather their information for their comprehensive plans. So we got inconsistency in what we were getting back. So on this chart, I've used only numbers that the Metropolitan Council is using, and they are available to the cities to use when they're updating their plans. But basically, it shows in the first column going down how our cities vary in size. Obviously, we have 2 quite large cities and 3 small. The next column is how many units right now are in those cities that are in that extremely low income category. Next one is how many units right now are in those cities that are in the very low. And then the next one is in units that are in those cities that are considered low income housing. The next column is public subsidized, and all that really means is that when those were built, there was government money going into the original building of them. And then the last column, of course, is mobile homes, because those are a vital part for our cities of providing affordable housing, and we have to be really aware of them. So, what's needed if we're going to, if that's a situation now, what's needed to plan for the future, which is basically 2021 to 2030. The Metropolitan Council says that the entire region needs to come up with 37,900 more household units. Could be apartments, can be homes, can be a variety of, can be mobile parks. And this is what the Metropolitan Council says for our cities. It is saying that Falcon Heights and Lauderdale actually do not need to add anymore. For one thing, both of them are, there isn't a lot of room for growth. Now that means adding more. It doesn't mean that they escape. They still need to maintain what they have. It just means that they don't need to add anymore, and mainly because they have no room. For Little Canada, the Metropolitan Council breaks it down again into extremely low, very low, low, but they need to work towards adding 79 more units for low-income housing. Maplewood needs to totally work towards adding 510 units. Roseville needs to work towards adding 142 more units. And of course, this is based on where our population is expected to go, how many more people we're expecting to add in all of our communities. Now there's another little very interesting component of this. If you are labeled an urban community or a suburban community, Falcon Heights, Lauderdale, Maplewood, and Roseville are designated as urban by the Metropolitan Council. And what that basically means is when they experience their big growth, where they just exploded post-World War II into the early 50s, those areas, now obviously this is mainly Maplewood and Roseville that we're talking about, but when they build or they rehab, they need to plan for 10 units per acre. Now an acre is not very large, so that really means they need to plan for multifamily buildings. Little Canada is actually designated as suburban. Now Little Canada is an old community, it's been there, but they did not experience its growth until the 1980s and early 1990s. And because they're classified differently, the Metropolitan Council is saying when they do their planning, they need to have a density of at least 5 units per acre. And then, as I said, it can be either development of a brand new building or it can be going in and rehabbing buildings that are in existence. So, why exactly is affordable housing important? I'm going to take a quote from Kathy Tenbrook, who is the State Director on Homelessness, and what she will say, because she works with this every day, this becomes a moral, ethical kind of line that we're looking at. We have too often in the past, when people who need housing come to us, and they also need support services. Maybe there are addiction problems, maybe there are mental health problems, maybe there's a language problem, maybe there's a lack of training so that they cannot get a skilled job. Whatever, a lot of people that are low income are in great need of support services. And our tendency in the past has always been, all right, we're going to get you help, we're going to get you the support services, and then we're going to get you a house. And what she is saying is, we need to reverse that. Let's get you into housing first, and then we will connect you to services. Because what they have found is, if a household has a place to live, it is their home, it is where they return, it is where they can get mail. If they have a home base, then the support services are way more likely to work. They're more open to help, they're more open to actually using them, to consistently use them. I just added this the other day. There was a very good kind of expose in the Pioneer Press on Sunday. And what it pointed out is when you take Minnesota as a whole, the median value of owner-occupied homes in Minnesota averages $38,000 more than our neighboring states. So that means North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa, Wisconsin. Housing is way more expensive in Minnesota. And what that does, of course, then, is as housing costs get more expensive, people in the lower income areas can't get a home. They can't afford it. And why is that? Some of it is land costs. Land costs have gone up. But a lot of it is building costs. We have very, very strong energy saving codes in this state, which is good. Better windows, better insulation in our buildings. You know, that's positive things, but it also contributes to the rise in housing or building costs. We also have very strong safety codes. Sprinkler systems are an example. How many sprinklers need to go in a building? I counted, it made me think about it. I counted mine. I live in a small condo. It's 1,260 square feet. I have 14 sprinklers, including one on my deck. I put them in the closets. So these safety codes actually are good, but they also make the cost of housing rise. Land-related fees. Now these are imposed by the city, and it's when you build something new or you rehab, you get your license to do that. There can be a city fee. There can be a pass-through fee from other agencies that work with the city. Infrastructure, putting in new sewers, new roads, sidewalks, all those are all multitude of fees that are added on to when you are going to develop. There are also, not all cities have this, but some cities do. I dealt with this when I lived out of state for a while. Impact fees, and what that ends up being is anticipation of what that development may do down the road to the community. If you've lived in the community for 30 years, why should you have to pay for the impact of these new people moving in? So some cities will have impact fees anticipating that down the road we're going to have to build another fire station over there. You know, this is going to, we're going to have more monies involved in plowing snow and so forth, and so there's a large impact fee that's also put in place. Fees can add $20,000 to $30,000 per unit. Now, if you're building a $500,000 house and you're spreading out your mortgage over 30 years, that's probably not going to mean a lot to you. But if you can only afford a $148,000 house or even a $200,000 house, adding $30,000 to that is going to mean a great deal and may even mean that then you can't afford that house. They're also upping the cost of building our zoning rules about lot size. We actually, in the greater metropolitan area, have some communities that will only allow houses to be built on 2.5 acres. One house on 2.5 acres. So those kinds of things all add to how much housing costs. So if you come in as a developer and you would like to build affordable housing, how in the world are you going to, with these costs, how are you even going to build it? Well, first of all, you're not going to build with your own money. You're going to need subsidies. And the biggest subsidy is called the LIHC, or the Low Income Housing Tax Credit. It's federal money, but it's administered here locally. Obviously, there isn't a lot of it, so the developers have to apply for it and are granted or rewarded with grants. There is also, the Met Council has a livable community program which you can apply for and get funding for either expansion or preservation, rehabbing. That's actually coming, that money is coming out of property taxes that the Met Council is administering. But the cities can also help developers. They can support appropriate density. They can say, yes, when we build more housing, we realize we're going to have to put in 10 units per acre, and the city can stand behind that. Some cities even will identify areas that they would like to have, or they are open to having affordable housing go into it. Some cities even acquire sites, and then when developers come to them, the sites are already available. Cities can reduce or waive some of their building permit costs. We talked about some of those fees before, but cities have, if you're going to come in and put in affordable housing, maybe we can be a little flexible on some of these things. Streamlining the administrative process. Sometimes when communities do not want affordable housing, what they will do is they will slow the administrative process down very much. And if a developer has applied for permits and this is moving along and taking a lot of time, that's money out of that developer's pocket. That developer's already brought in money to build, and now he's not being able to do anything with it, or he or she. So it's kind of a slow-mo way of discouraging housing, or especially affordable housing, and developers learn which communities do this, and then they go elsewhere. And making zoning regulations flexible, without losing the safety. You can be flexible in how they're enforced. And also to partner with developers. If developers are applying for funds and the city is working with them, they are much more likely to get funding than if they have to go in on their own. What about that poor renter? Well, the big thing about if you are low income is to try to get what is called a Section 8 voucher. Again, it's funded by the federal government, but it's administered locally. And basically, what it does is it still expects households to pay 30% of their income for rent, and then the Metro HRA will pay the remainder. But renters have to find their own housing, just like that poor woman in St. Louis Park. It was up to her, and after spending weeks and weeks and weeks of calling every apartment complex that she could, she finally located something in Mound. The problem on this is money is limited. And we might expect that it's going to be even more limited because right now the budgeting at the federal level is, the threat is that these areas are going to be cut back even more. You can be waiting to get on the wait list for years. Sometimes the wait lists are even closed for years because they've already got a full load and there's no one else that they can add to it. It is not very easy to get a Section 8 voucher. Now there are some additional vouchers that are available for particular situations, such as bridges for adults with mental health issues, and Veterans Affairs Supporting Housing, which is for homeless veterans. These are the numbers, most recent numbers, they've probably changed somewhat, of people that are living in our communities that actually use vouchers. And considering how many low-income units, that means that most of the people in low-income units are not using vouchers. So what can cities do for those individuals? When new development, when somebody applies for new development or they apply to rehab their buildings, cities have the right to just require that these landlords accept Section 8 voucher allocations. In fact, Minneapolis is doing that right now, much to the unhappiness of many landlords. But they have said, if you're required, you have to accept Section 8 vouchers. Now, landlords often don't like them because, for number one, they don't like the paperwork, the government paperwork that goes with it. But there's also a little bit of NIMBYism, not in my backyard. If you are a low-income renter, can we count on you? Are you going to take care of it? Are you going to keep it clean? How are you going to ruin my apartment building? So there's a little bit of that too, as far as looking at low-income renters negatively. Cities can also work with organizations like Housing Link to assist people in finding affordable housing. It would be great if every apartment listed, whether they listed on Housing Link, that when they have openings, so that people who are looking for low-income housing at least get know where to start. And cities usually license rental properties, but most of them, and at least of our cities, are not regulating. They're not going back and checking, is this a clean place? Has this place got heat? Is this place got hot water? They're not going back and checking on a regular basis. So with all of that negativity, is there anything working? There is a nonprofit Greater Minnesota Housing Fund that has gone into place, and what it's doing is developing a regional pool of money to assist apartment complex buyers. The reasoning is that if apartment complex buyers can get some assistance in purchasing, they're not going to come in and immediately up their rental property or prices, so that their people who are living there, who have been living there, are going to have to move out. The Veterans Association has actually come up with an incredibly good program, and in Minnesota we are right on the edge of actually ending veteran homelessness. This is coming federal money again with bipartisan support, and basically you call a telephone number if you're a veteran and you say, I need help, and the person on the other end of that number is going to get you into support services you need and help you find housing. And it is working here in this state. In fact, the model has proved to be so effective and working so well that Kathy Tenbrook, that I had quoted before, is saying that you can take that model and apply it to other groups. For instance, homeless youth. We just need to take it and craft it, and so it can be used by some of these other groups. For some of us, those of us who have State Representative Alice Hausman, she has been incredible in affordable housing. In the year 2014 alone, she was instrumental in helping the Minnesota legislature approve $100 million for housing programs. And if you go back to 2012, she's actually been instrumental in securing $200 million for housing and services. So what about our league? Now, we do not have to have, for those league members who've gone through these studies before, we don't need consensus. We have positions on homelessness. We have national positions, we have state positions. CMAL has positions on housing. All we need to do is use those positions, that when we go to our cities, we should encourage them to provide full range of affordable housing, right down to housing for the extremely low income. We should be encouraging them to improve and preserve what we have now. I know the city manager in Little Canada, that is something that is very important to him, and it's one of his priorities is to work with rehabbing buildings that are actually in existence right now. Support using incentives when development comes or redevelopment. Protect our mobile home parks. They're a wonderful, wonderful base for affordable housing, but again, like any other rental property, it needs to be monitored. And as far as this came up before, not just license rental properties, but regulate them. We should have somebody in every one of our cities who actually establishes a relationship with the landlords. You know, standing over there talking, how are things going? What are your problems? What can we help you with? And take a look at, you need to work on this. And that same person needs to work with landlords of rental property to make sure that that they are actually linking to like housing links, where people who are looking for affordable housing have a source that they can find out where the affordable housing is located. In fact, our city should even make that a requirement. If you're going to rent, then you've got to also put your name of your building into Housing Link. So, about you. If you are a member or if you're not a member and you want to see our written summary of our study, you can go to our website. It's basically LWV RosevilleArea.org. The summary is on there. This PowerPoint will soon be on there. Also the summaries of all the people we've interviewed so far. And if you live in Roseville or you live in any of our cities, join your cities are having comprehensive plan discussions right now. Find out when those meetings are occurring. Tomorrow night, there's one here in Roseville that is just focusing on the housing aspect of the comprehensive plan. That's their entire focus. Hopefully, there are several of us who are going to be out of the area tomorrow night, so I don't know who exactly is coming from the housing committee, but there should be someone there. And for us as a housing study committee, what we're going to recommend at our annual meeting is that this study is not over, that we extended another year and making next year our year of advocacy. And one of our thoughts has been that if we're going to work with the cities on affordable housing, we can't do it alone. We need to be having other groups in the community who are concerned about this as well and work with them. Some of them are faith-based community members. In Roseville, and I talk about Roseville because that's where I happen to live, but the faith-based community members in this city are very active in a lot of community endeavors, and we hope to work with them and explaining kind of what we're looking for, what we're working on, and get their help and support. Collaboration is more powerful than going it on your own. So, with that, Emma is here, and I don't know, did you want to just open it up for questions, or should I just go ahead, or you want to
You can go ahead.
Okay, and you can, Emma is on our committee too, and so hopefully she's here to answer some things too. But why don't we at this point just open it up for any questions you have? Yes.
When this study was done, was senior housing considered? I mean, there are so many senior citizens in Roseville, and when they want to get rid of their single dwelling, they're still healthy enough that they don't need assisted living and they don't need a nursing home. But there doesn't seem to be much senior.
Do you remember the chart back there that had publicly assisted units? Most senior citizen, I shouldn't say most, many senior citizen developments use HUD money to build. So when you get a listing of public assisted buildings, they're included in there. That's a real fuzzy area because not everybody living in senior buildings is low income. So there becomes a fuzzy area on where you include them in the statistics. And I think that's something we have to be really aware of when we talk about that to our cities, that and when they look at their totals, what they are really looking at. Fine, does that answer what you're thinking?
About a year ago, the city of Roseville, Good Samaritan Homes had brought forth a proposal for new affordable housing, approximately between the 50 and 60% AMI, and the Planning Commission approved it unanimously. And then when it went to the city council, they rejected it because their concern was that if they approved this, it was going to be a 4-story to make it more affordable. That in 40 years, that when the building had to be torn down or redone, that someone could come in and build an 80-story building, which is just not feasible. One way around that is to bring that proposal back and bring forth what's called a conditional use permit. So what it says, you can use this property to build the senior housing project under a conditional use permit, which would therefore not change the way they're zoning that property. It was located just a few blocks from the library. What used to be on that property before was a nursing home. So it's kind of been at a stall. So I think if you're looking at senior housing, which unfortunately in the state of Minnesota, the fastest growing homelessness group of people is seniors. There are no longer federal dollars for senior housing. At the state legislature, we're working on changing the way bonding dollars are used. Right now, senior housing is not a use for bonding dollars, but we are working on legislation to try to change that. So it is really up to our states now, especially with our national leadership right now, to really look at that senior housing piece. So especially in the city of Roseville, I'm the legislative coordinator for MICA. We're the Metropolitan Interfaith Council on Affordable Housing. So that's something that this group, it would be helpful if we talk to the city council members and ask them about re-looking at that Good Samaritan proposal under a conditional use permit.
Can we get your name and contact
Yes.
information?
Yep.
As I said, one of our goals is to collaborate with as many different groups and people that we can. So that
absolutely.
would be really, really helpful.
Okay.
Good.
What happens to the refugees and immigrants that are coming in that are trying to get resettled? Are they kind of getting caught up in all the budget cuts and all that stuff, or are the resettler programs helping them find housing in?
It's an interesting, I'm afraid that I am not aware of a specific program.
Okay.
But it's something we need to learn more about, without a doubt, especially because our communities, we have a lot of refugees in our 5 communities. I don't know the answer to that. There was a man at the, I don't know if you read the panel presentation in February. One of the speakers was from MICA, and there were some MICA people in that audience, and that was a concern of theirs too. And that's one of our lists for next year to find out more about.
Because I know culturally we just live with family.
Right.
When I moved from Boston, I was paying for Boston's apartment, and I lived 6 months in Ghana with my great aunt.
Yeah.
But that was just crazy, right? Like she lived in a small apartment. So I know culturally people take care of each other until they kind of get on their feet. But what is a community of, like, how are they getting help, the cultural help of the community?
And that I don't have an answer to. I do know though, I'm just as a kind of a side to that is when the formula for classifying people as to how much, like for vouchers and that, it is not, they don't look at the household as far as, it doesn't have to be like a traditional household. It can be an extended family household. It's just who is in that house, I mean, how the numbers that are in that household, not
Is it
how they
gross
necessarily
income
relate
or
to each
net-
other.
Do they look at the gross income or net income when they're making those calculations?
Another good question, put that in
Gross,
there.
it's gross income.
It's gross
Thank you,
income.
thank
Yes.
you, okay.
Okay, so 30% of gross, but really that's not take home. So it
Yeah,
could be more
exactly,
than
yes,
30%.
that's right,
So
yes.
it could be close to
Yes.
50-60% if you
Yes,
really look at
yes.
the 4 bedrooms, you're looking at
Yeah.
$1,900. It could be
Yeah,
almost
yeah.
the whole paycheck.
Right,
So one paycheck you live on, and one paycheck you're paying.
yeah. We still need you to get new ideas for us. Yes.
So when they're talking about, how many low-income units an area needs, do they look at, like, where they want to place it, both in terms of trying to prevent concentration of poverty, but also in terms of, like you're saying, locating the housing near those low-income jobs? Do they take that into account when they're saying this area needs these many units?
Well, obviously, every city, that should fall into every city's comprehensive plan, is they do look at transportation too. And I know for a fact that that topic has been brought up in Roseville. Whether they will proceed in doing anything, about that too.
So do areas know, X percentage of the jobs in our city are these low-income jobs? Do they even track that? Do they know?
We asked the question in our survey about jobs, and none of the cities had any information about that.
Makes it hard to plan.
Craig, did you have a question behind?
Just a couple quick comments, if I could. And first of all, I compliment you for your excellent work on this. Really needed and well done. Two things that, and one of them I think is an elephant in the room that we need to talk about, and that's the politics of trying to get this stuff done. Even if you have a city council that's willing to do this, and I've worked for some over the years that were trying to do everything right, but then you end up with this incredible neighborhood opposition and community opposition, and if any of them are going to come back to office, they kind of have to fold on these projects. So there's some way, even though I know we don't become involved in politics per se, but there's a political issue here that's the elephant in the room that makes
Right.
these difficult to get done, even when some cities are trying to do the right thing. And then just a second comment, there's another difficult cloud on the horizon. If you look at what's happening with the proposed federal budget, with the reduced taxes on the upper incomes, that lessens the appetite for the tax credits and the municipal bonds that are so critical. And then there's also major cuts in the community development block grant and HUD programs, so we're getting a double whammy in terms of available funds. So the challenge becomes even more significant.
In fact, I was thinking about when you were making your statement and you finally got to the city council, what their reasoning behind opposition, were they getting pressure from neighborhood, was that a NIMBYism kind of pressure and they were just using these other things to kind of say, well, this is why we're not doing.
With the developers of that project, a lot of it was going to increase traffic in the area. The developers paid themselves to have a traffic study, and it would literally only increase traffic waiting time to get in and out of their driveways by less than 30 seconds, and that was at peak times. So once we brought that information forward, it kind of quieted down. At this point, it's really about the education piece. The biggest fears that were brought forth was a taller building being put up if they change the zoning. So that can all be taken care of by a conditional use permit. So I think enough time has gone by where groups can be supportive and we can go in there together and say, this is still a viable project. It would literally, in that income category, when you look at what the Met Council is looking at, that doubles what Roseville is actually needed for.
Right.
So in one project, you can take care of most of your need for the next 20 years. And this developer has an amazing track record of good quality buildings, no problems whatsoever. They built across Minnesota and South Dakota for decades. So that's something that I really think with how much has been in the news about the cost and what the need is, especially with the growth of our senior population, that it's really something that can be calmly talked about and revisited without being blaming on either side or indecisive. It's just like, have we thought about this? You know, let's look it back and then bring it forward to the zoning commission again, saying, okay, this is why the city council was against it, but we can revisit it and say a conditional use permit, and everyone that voted against it, it was because of the potential of something larger being built.
Yes.
What happens to buildings that take advantage of the tax credits and then down a few years, the neighborhood becomes negative, like it becomes negative towards us, and then they take away the Section 8 or the vouchers, because that's happening in Eden Prairie and all that stuff. Do they have to pay the taxes back?
It's
It's a 15-year requirement.
There's a 50
Yes.
year, so
And
once
yes,
that 50-year
it
one
has
is done.
15, one
50,
time.
okay,
For most, there's usually a 30-year.
okay.
They
So then
can't.
they
And once that time period has passed,
Yeah,
they can technically do what they would like.
and they are doing it in
Yeah.
some areas
Yeah.
because they're like the schools, yeah, so
Mhm.
I was just wondering about that. Okay, so 15 years,
Yeah.
okay.
Yes.
So I work in affordable housing, multifamily housing, and I recently looked at the State Housing Finance Agency and its funding in Ramsey County. They have funded no rental housing in Ramsey County in the last 5 years outside of the city of St. Paul. Zero, absolutely none. They awarded for Twin Lakes in Roseville, which then met with a significant neighborhood opposition and the project died. But I'm wondering if when you're talking to the Housing Finance Agency, they knew you were with Roseville or this area,
Mhm.
Lee, if they commented at all about how their scoring system doesn't line up with Ramsey County, or if they're gonna put money into Ramsey County.
That I cannot answer. But again,
That might be a good place for
yeah,
some.
actually, yeah. And again, I can't, I'm sorry, but I don't, are you a league member or?
No, I just saw the.
Which is fine, no, the reason.
I live here though.
But again, it's a great question, and I again would like to have contact information for you that maybe we can work with you, on going forward on some of these things. So if you also would leave us your contact information, good.
I actually worked on a Good Samaritan.
Oh,
project.
okay.
We gave it a try.
Yeah, good.
What's happening, or what are the thoughts on integrating affordable housing with other housing developments? Because that seems to me, when I hear that word affordable housing, I get concerned that we're segmenting our population.
Right.
And we're valuing people differently. And
actually, that is a sound idea, and you can see it in different places in the metropolitan area where that has actually been done. The interesting thing is, I noticed when I have a separate graphic for Roseville on single-family homes that can be considered low income as far as their value. It's when you look at those kinds of things, and because we have older communities, low income housing really is spread throughout the city simply because of the age of the cities that we are living in.
right, but for the new housing,
Right.
that what happens there,
Yes,
right?
yes, right. And it's something I think that certainly needs to be considered. But I think the other, I don't know, I'm just kind of thinking off the top of my head. If, say, Roseville, this Metropolitan Council would like to have us to a density of 10 units per acre, that's almost limited then to multifamily buildings. And, you can do that in so many ways. I happen to know that in Minnetonka, they have, when new developments come in, you have to have a certain number of units in that building, that new development, that are considered low income. Now, what kind of low income, I don't know. I'm assuming we're not talking about extremely low income. But even so, it's kind of a start in the right direction in that any new multifamily unit, building going in Minnetonka has to have at least some low income designated units. So something like that, cities can do those kinds of things. They can make that kind of a requirement.
St. Louis Park has done that also.
St. Louis Park?
Yeah, right now it's only at 10%. Micah would like to see it at 30, but it's a start. So they are trying to integrate with anything new that there is affordable housing. And like you stated, we really need to focus on, a lot of your cities will say, we have a lot of affordable housing. Well, a lot of it's at that 80%.
Yes,
Right.
yeah.
So, and the need, especially on fixed incomes, is much lower. So that's something, like I said, Micah believes, everyone should be treated as you wish to be treated. And it's all about fairness and having conversations and taking a calm look at it, but bringing up the ideas to cities, especially Eden Prairie on the 20th is having a big affordable housing forum and has been working with the immigrant population for many years. So that might give you an option to hear how other larger cities, such as yourselves, is trying to work with those populations and have the conversations on what is our next step.
Yes.
Bonnie, I was working with some congregational groups in St. Anthony when the Apache site was developed into
yes.
housing.
Yeah.
And we were very grateful for the help that we got from Micah. And the issue was, what does affordable housing mean? And what it finally came down to was, could our teachers, could our firemen, could our policemen, any of our civic servants who were working for St. Anthony afford to live there? And they couldn't at the initial cost they were planning. So, we were able to get some percentage of affordable housing, but it was not a popular idea.
Right, no. And going back to what she was saying too, that's a really great way of approaching it, to get in the concept. But then beyond that, we've still got to push our cities to go beyond those people. But that's, to even the people who are in those extremely low categories too.
Well, just tying into that, it's my mom, she lives at Maplewood too, and there's all this building going on Cleveland, and those are service jobs. All those jobs are service jobs. Those people, the people who are going to be working there, aren't going to be able to afford to live in this neighborhood unless there's a real effort to make sure that there's housing somehow interspersed within that. Because those are the jobs that are growing in these towns.
Yes.
I have a history question. I think it was in the 70s, 1970s, when the pressure was on for the Roseville City Council to approve, in order to get federal funding, they had to come up with some affordable, well, they called it fair housing then. And I can't remember where the fair housing ended up being developed. And I'm wondering how it came, how it is being maintained, if it's in good shape now. Does anybody know where that?
I don't know. There's Coventry, which is over. But you think that's what it was at that time?
I think that was it.
I don't know. I don't know about what condition it is. From the outside, it looks fine. I have no idea if you go inside what it's like.
I've been in the senior housing part of it, and they remodeled a few years ago. It's very nice.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting concept too on low-income housing. I was once on kind of a city tour with George Latimer, and we were down in Frogtown at the low-income. I'm drawing a blank on what the low-income housing area is down in there. But he was saying, actually, that, and you could even, as we drove by, you could see they were doing rehab and everything, but he said that it actually is very successful, but what happens is they have on-site management. And when you have low-income housing, if you have on-site management, it's much more likely to be maintained well, to have people get the right support services and everything, because they know right where to go, and there's somebody right there that can take care of them, which is kind of an aside. So, there any other questions, or, well, okay, maybe this should be our last one, and, okay.
I just kind of a comment to you about your comment about attitudes towards the Section 8 renters. And I want to say that I think it's important to acknowledge that it is harder to rent to those people. There are more problems, and I say that from experience because my mother has owned rental properties. She owns a duplex now, she's owned a fourplex in the past, and has rented to Section 8 people and has had very significant problems.
Yeah.
And one example is she had a woman that was living there when she bought it, and she'd been living there for like 10 years, and asked my mother if she could replace the carpet because it was in horrendous condition, but she didn't own a vacuum. And my mother said, well, if you get a vacuum, I will replace the carpet. You know, she would sweep it with a broom, but you can imagine 10 years of not vacuuming the carpet, what that carpet is like. And she owned this fourplex for less than 10 years, I don't know, it was several years, but she ended up having to like completely redo 2 of the units. And when the margins are small and you're redoing a unit every few years, she ended up selling it. She couldn't, and she was doing all the work herself, which is why I got involved, because I had to go help her fix stuff. But it is really hard.
No, I hear what you're saying, and I can understand why the landlords are not really open to it, you know. So it's kind of like, okay, that's an issue, it's a problem, but we still have to have housing for people in that, at that level. So, you know, where do you have to find the line.
Well, doesn't that kind of come back to the comment that you made earlier about that one of the very first things you said is that idea that once people have housing, then you bring the services to them. And so it seems then that these things must have to really work together.
Right.
So you're talking about housing, but you've also got to talk about then for people who are struggling, you know, their income and their life situations have them in where they are economically. What kind of help, how do we integrate the help, right? So that then, maybe if this is someone who just needed someone to help her clean her house, or, you know, things like
I
that.
know what the answer is.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But to
We
keep,
have to acknowledge that and
right,
try to figure it out.
right, and so to keep that in our minds when we're talking, those things are not exclusive of each other, right?
So Rita, did you?
I just had a question about that I probably mentioned early on with this study, and that is my concern for the various city officials. You referred to Roseville a lot because you're a Roseville resident, but of course I'm not a Roseville resident, so I'm curious about other cities. But what, as a team or as a committee, what's your feeling for the understanding by our city councils? You know, you referred to one city administrator, but just in general, did you get a feeling that they're understanding kind of the crux of this issue?
You know, it's hard to know. The Urban Land Institute goes out and presents to all the cities their background, their knowledge, and they do a very excellent job of it. And now I'm drawing a blank on, there is an organization of mayors, and maybe somebody here will remember the terminology for it, where the mayors participate in a lot of these presentations and so forth. And what we found is that if mayors are active in that kind of receptive to listening to a lot of these groups come in and talk to them, they are much more likely themselves to encourage their city councils and so forth to examine the topic more carefully. What we found, because we started last fall, at that point, it didn't seem like any city was much interested in it at all. And we had a couple of cities that actually put some effort and energy into answering our survey. We had 3 cities that we had to hound into getting the information. One of them did not have any information at all, and finally, on their own, did come up with some base. 2 cities, after hounding them numerous times, and one morning finally getting a hold of somebody else, that afternoon all of a sudden we have this information, which means they just pull little pieces out of the, from here and there, just to get it to them. So I can't really say there was a tremendous amount of interest or cooperation on this. Now, right at the moment, they are having to be interested in their overall comprehensive plans. So they are certainly moving forward to it, and I would like to think they are all more interested 6 months later here at where we're at. We'll see. So with that,
Oh, Bonnie and team, thank you, thank you, thank you. Probably expect to hear more about this because